Science has shown that you have to actually be asleep to truly evaluate the quality of a mattress. Assuming you don't want to spend the night in a mattress store, we've got the next best thing. Bed Match at Mattress Warehouse. Bed Match is our exclusive diagnostic system that recommends the mattresses that are right for you. Say goodbye to mattress shopping guesswork and hello to your best night's sleep ever in your own house. And hello, low prices guaranteed for 1 full year. Mattress Warehouse.
Say goodbye to your credit card rewards. Greedy corporate mega stores, led by Walmart and Target, are pushing for a law in Congress to take away your hard-earned cash back and travel points to line their pockets. The Durbin-Marshall credit card bill would enact harmful credit card routing mandates that would end credit card rewards as we know it. If you love your credit card rewards, tell your lawmakers, hands off my rewards. Tell them to oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill.
Welcome to California in Focus. I'm David Mastio. Today we're talking about the State of the State speech in California. Joining me today is the Center Square's Gavin Newsom. Kenneth Trupp is actually joining us today. He's the Center Square's California reporter. And I will also be talking a little bit more than usual because I wrote a couple of the stories about the State of the State speech. So, Kenneth, why don't we start with how we ever got to have a State of the State speech, because for a long time it didn't seem like we were going to have one.
That's right, David. Newsom was initially supposed to give his State of the State speech in March, right after the primaries. Newsom had spent a lot of his political capital getting something called Proposition 1 on the ballot. This Proposition 1 would have provided about $6.5 billion in bonds with interest that cost about $13.5 billion to mostly fund housing for the homeless, along with a few behavioral health and mental health and addiction facility expansions. It was sort of this partner bill to another bill that allowed for California to compel people to get mental health and behavioral health and addiction treatment. So even though most of that money is going towards homeless housing, at least there's going to be some expansion in facilities. Anyhow, Prop 1 he thought it was going to pass by a wide margin. It didn't. It took us weeks to figure out whether or not it would pass. And when it ultimately did pass, it only passed by a handful of votes. So Newsom was delaying his State of the State address until there was a clearer picture on Prop 1. By the time that clearer picture emerged, California was in the middle of a major budget problem, and he was getting national flack for having turned what was a $100 billion budget surplus into an up to $73 billion budget deficit. The governor has since worked with the legislature to make about $47 billion in spending cuts, spending delays, unofficial tax increases to meet the budget. But the crazy thing is, Newsom wasn't even really here to sign that budget. He had his lieutenant governor sign this budget while he was in Atlanta serving as a surrogate in the spin room at the Joe Biden-Donald Trump debate last night.
Did you get to watch the debate?
Unfortunately, I did get to watch the debate. I also watched Newsom's participation in the spin room after. Indications that he is willing and able to step into Biden's shoes should Biden not want to run seem to be high. We see these pictures out of the spin room where all cameras, all media attention, you saw the crowd of the entire room swarm Newsom right after the debate. And you can't help but wonder whether that move of him going to the debate, his lieutenant governor signing the budget bill, and just 2 days prior, him announcing that his family is moving back to Marin County for the kids to continue their school, suggests that Newsom's not going to be in Sacramento very much anymore. And the emphasis, of course, of his State of the State address on national politics suggests that he really may be the DNC's choice should Biden not be running for president any longer after last night's debate.
That's really interesting. Let's get into the substance of the State of the State speech. This week you wrote about his Rosy report on crime in the state.
Yeah, specifically in the Bay Area, crime, he did note that there were some major declines in crime, but we have data that suggests that's not really a 30% decline that he's claiming. There were a few funny points in there where he was talking about how red states have a bad crime agenda and that cities like Jacksonville and Memphis specifically have higher homicide rates than San Francisco and Los Angeles. Jacksonville, Florida, and Memphis, Tennessee have Democratic mayors, so I'm really not sure what point he was trying to make there. But then he moved on to say property crime in SF is down 32%, and in Oakland there's been a 33% overall drop in crime. But when you look at the actual data, you see that, there are some crimes where there's been decrease, maybe like a 10% decrease in a lot of crimes, which is really good. But in SF in Oakland, there's been a 50% decrease in reported theft. And that doesn't really make sense. Do we really think that there's been a 50% decrease in theft, but only like 10% decrease in things like robbery? Of course, someone is going to report a robbery because they're being held at gunpoint or some kind of threat of force or violence is being used. And a person who commits a robbery will actually be prosecuted for a felony. Whereas most theft isn't just mere theft is a misdemeanor that really most prosecutors just don't have the bandwidth to handle right now. They're going to go after the robbery felony, but they don't really have the manpower to take on just a theft charge. Interestingly, in Oakland, where, again, you said reported crime is down 33%, an NBC Bay Area report found that 97% of reported car break-ins aren't actually included in the department's crime statistics that it passed on to Newsom. In 1 month, where the department said that there were 30 total break-ins, NBC Bay Area found that there were 30 reported break-ins per day. In Oakland, again, this data shows that there was of the 33% annualized decrease in crime, most of that was from a 50% decrease in reported theft, motor vehicle theft, which everyone always reports because you need that reported to get your insurance losses covered. There's only a 12% decrease, suggesting that people just are no longer reporting larceny, burglary, and just small theft. More evidence that suggests this is that when one Target store in San Francisco started reporting all of its theft, that one store became the source of half of the shoplifting reports in the whole county and doubled the number of the county's shoplifting reports, suggesting that most people just aren't reporting most crime at all when it comes to theft, which means Newsom's, claims that crime is down 35%, they don't hold water because that's just reported crime. We know real crime is probably significantly up, or at least not going down 50% as is being reported.
Let's move on to another subject, which I like talking about a lot more than crime, which is myself. I wrote a story this week about part of the governor's speech in which he said that Republicans are making their states much less safe because they allow bump stocks, which California banned before the ATF got around to using regulation to ban bump stocks nationally. And that's an interesting point of view because there have been absolutely zero bump stock related attacks since the Nevada killing in 2017. And there have been no attacks in Republican states. There have been no attacks in Democratic states. And it was really funny. This didn't get in the story, but I contacted the Brady campaign, one of the big gun control groups, to ask them whether they could help me find any examples of assaults or murders committed with bump stocks. And rather than come back to me with an answer that no, they couldn't find any, they told me that their whole research staff had gone on vacation, which I think is unlikely. But at least the Gun Violence Archive came up with some examples of nonviolent events in which the police confiscated illegal bump stocks. They gave me a list. And Gavin Newsom was also wrong. Even the Nevada shooting was not a red state shooting. It was a purple state shooting. The state has a mix of Democrats and Republicans in its federal Senate positions, and they've switched off in the governor's positions. They've switched off in the legislature, in the state legislature. They've switched off in members of the House. So it's really a purple state. But more than that, in one sense, it's a Democratic state because in the last 4 presidential elections, it's always voted for the Democrat. Anyway, I wasn't letting you talk there for a long time, Kenneth. Thanks for joining us today and talking earlier in the conversation. Listeners can keep up with our stories and more at thecentersquare.com.
Say goodbye to your credit card rewards. Greedy corporate mega stores, led by Walmart and Target, are pushing for a law in Congress to take away your hard-earned cash back and travel points to line their pockets. The Durbin-Marshall credit card bill would enact harmful credit card routing mandates that would end credit card rewards as we know it. If you love your credit card rewards, tell your lawmakers, hands off my rewards. Tell them to oppose the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill.